been open for a couple months now. Still in the infant stages as we continue to see new programs join us. We hope you come check it out. Obviously, those here with us today, you are here. For those at home, please come see the great activities that are going on. We've added a new fitness court outside, which you can check out when you come by. A lot of great things are just to kind of help the public. Right now, we're open 8 to 8, Monday through Friday, and Saturday 10 to 2. So if you're wondering what our hours are right now, we hope to expand as we get colder outside and more people start to come in. Weather's been beautiful, so our courts have been very busy outside. But just wanted to welcome you, and we're excited for this event tonight. So thank you, Fraser.
Thanks, Lance. So tonight, let's get on with the agenda. So what we want to do is explain through narrative. We want to explain all the different infrastructure elements, starting with the planning board, and Andy Wandell will take us through elements of the master plan, but also, what the plans are beyond. Then we will turn to Bill Chenard, who will talk us through the road plan. We have Dan Sullivan, the water superintendent, who will talk us through the water plan. So already within 3 topics, the 2 hot topics, water and roads, are getting covered. And then we're grateful to have the vice chair of the ZBA, Chris McGrail, who will share some of the zoning rules and laws. And then we have an empty spot for Jimmy Bristol. Jimmy Bristol's a big developer in town, doing 2 rather large projects that are important. He's also at a golf tournament right now, so we're hoping we see him with a trophy later. But we'll slow boat through to Jimmy's round, as he's probably doing on the 19th hole right now. And then finally, we're you got it. We're very grateful to Peter Foreman, who is the chairman of the South Shore Chamber, and he is going to share some of the experiences of our neighboring towns. So, Andy, are you ready?
No.
Okay.
But I'll start.
I'll put somebody else's slides up if you wish. But
No.
okay.
My name is Andy Wandell. I'm chair of the planning board, and just wanted to say it's great to be in this building. It's a long time coming. We did a lot of work to get here, and it's just the result is pretty stunning. So really glad to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about planning board, talk a little bit about the master plan. Planning board, if you don't know already, the things that we deal with on the planning board are typically zoning bylaws. So we shepherd the zoning bylaws through the process. We're also responsible for any site plan review, so any change of use on a property, we have to oversee the site plan. We also oversee new subdivisions, new housing, things like that. So you don't usually get a chance to hear about a lot of the new projects in town until we have a public hearing. So it's good to get in front of people up front and let them know what's going on in town. So the master plan. This master plan is 2024. The last master plan was 20 years ago in 2004, and before that, 1971. So we had a pretty big gap in master plan. I was on the master plan committee in 2004. We instituted a lot of the things in that master plan, one of which is the Center Protection District, a couple of other things that came out of that master plan as well. We had a great group of people work on the master plan with us, the Master Plan Collaboration Committee. I see a lot of the folks who are on that committee in the room today. They did a great job putting together the plan and working with VHB to put it all together. We accepted the plan a couple of months ago at the planning board. We didn't appoint a specific implementation team for that. We felt that the planning board should be responsible for shepherding the master plan and overseeing the master plan. So we will continue to do that. And we do have some things that we're looking at, specifically having to do with zoning bylaws based on the master plan that came out of 2024. So some of the interesting things about the master plan is, believe it or not, open space increased by 30% in Pembroke over the 20-year gap between 2004 and 2024, which means that a third of our town is in open space. Now, as you may know, Residence A is the primary zoning, the zone in Pembroke, and that makes up roughly 80% of all of the available land use. So taking 33% of that land use into open space really limits the amount of land that's left for residential. That means we're pretty close to build out. Other couple of interesting notes is business use actually decreased, and this is land use. So business use actually decreased by approximately 2% in that 20-year period, and residential use was very modest, between 4 and 5%. So again, we're very close to build out. And if you take a look at the available land for residential use, we're at about plus or minus 400 acres. And then if you consider infrastructure and wetlands and some of the other constraints on residential development, it's probably a lot less than that 400 acres. So the key takeaways is we may have to take a look at some other ways to zone what's left to get a bit more density or modest density in the land that's available for residential. And housing growth is economic growth, as we all know, that provides great jobs, but also provides housing, which is an important thing. We're in the middle of a severe housing shortage. I think everyone knows that the prices are way, way up. One of the only ways to overcome that is through more inventory. So if we can get more inventory, and that's not just us that need to do that, our surrounding towns need to participate in that as well. So again, zoning will need to be reassessed to allow for efficient use of the remaining available land. So I thought I'd go over a couple of the business zones in town, just to give you an idea of where they are and what's allowed in them. We've got the residential commercial district. This is Washington Street from Barker Street to the Duxbury line. The uses there include medical, professional, retail, light industry, personal services. You'll see a nice mix of residential and commercial in the residential commercial district, hence the name. But one interesting factor here is multi-unit dwellings are allowed by special permit, up to 4 units per acre. Now, an interesting fact is that we haven't seen a new subdivision come before the board for at least 5 or 6 years. So the single-family home subdivision we're getting less and less of them, probably because of the constraints of land use. And the only real projects that we've had for new housing have been all along the Route 53 corridor. So you'll see them at Congress Street and Washington Street. You'll see them next to Dairy Twist. You'll see them across from Dairy Twist. So that housing is very much in desire. So people like single-family zoning. However, with people aging in these large homes and subdivisions, they'd like to have an option of a home where they don't need to take care of everything. And that would free up their home in a subdivision to a younger family who may want to come in and start a family in Pembroke. So that kind of housing, I think, is in great demand everywhere throughout the Commonwealth, especially here in the South Shore. So the other business zones are Business A, and if you're not familiar, that's Mattakesa Street to the Rotary, and then in Bryantville Center. And Business A allows all uses allowed by right in the residential commercial district, also allows gas stations, auto repair and sales, nursing homes, and restaurants by special permit, and single-family residential is allowed, but no mixed use. So you can't have commercial and residential on the same use on the same property. But you can have a single-family residential home, and that is zoned just like Residence A, 150 feet of frontage and 40,000 square foot. Business B is the 139 Washington Street intersection, and all of Scusa Street and Church Street to the Marshfield line. That also includes where the Christmas tree shop was. That allows all uses allowed in residential commercial district in A, with different dimensional requirements for frontage and lot size. And single-family residents are allowed in that, and no mixed use. So next we go to industrial districts A and B. So that's Corporate Park, Pembroke Woods, Riverside Drive, where a lot of our businesses are located. We allow health and medical, business financial, light industry, hotels and a convention center, assisted living, and office buildings not to exceed 4 stories in height. Now, a couple of years ago, we did a housing production plan where we found that the amount of housing or affordable housing not low income, but affordable housing available to folks in the service industries, teachers, firefighters, is very hard to come by in Pembroke. So we decided to allow residential multifamily housing in the industrial districts A and B, and that multifamily housing was allowed by special permit. So I know it's very controversial to talk about the MBTA adjacent zoning, but we were ready for it. So we had to make very little changes to our existing zoning to actually pass the MBTA adjacent communities law. We just had to change it from going from special permit to by right. And if you look at that area of town, we already have significant multifamily housing there. So Pembroke Woods is 230 units on 50 acres. There was a second phase of that was proposed years and years ago that would have doubled the amount of units on that 50-acre site. That's pretty much textbook of what the MBTA communities law is. And there's 2 overlay districts, and this is kind of funny because it's really kind of a sign of the times, right? So before there was the recreational marijuana passed in Massachusetts, there was medical marijuana allowed. So we decided to zone for that. That's allowed in the industrial district A and B in the area west of Route 3. And then years and years ago, if you didn't zone for adult usage, so strip clubs, adult bookstores, things like that, it could prop up anywhere in town. So you had to designate an area for it. And that designation is industrial A and B zones east of Route 3. And then finally, the Center Protection District, which is Center Street up to Mountain Ave, Mattakesa Street up to Grove Street. We at one time allowed mixed use there, but we were getting projects in front of us that were either residential or commercial. Actually, we got very few commercial applications in the Center Protection District. Almost all of them were residential. So we did change that again. We've gone back to either you do residential or you do commercial in the Center Protection District. That's something I think we want to take a look at again, especially with some changes that are going on in the center of town. For instance, the fire station won't be there anymore because we have a great new public safety building coming up. So that property will have to be considered. We have 2 gas stations that are kind of grandfathered in. They can't make any changes because that use is no longer allowed in the Center Protection District. So every time they come to us to do a whole new site plan, we tell them that they're not allowed to do that. So they've remained exactly the same as they've been for years and years and years because of that. So I think a comprehensive look at the Center Protection District, some of the needs, some of the things that are attractive to the town is going to be warranted. Other things that we're looking at, future issues, just saw the Housing Act passed. A big piece of that is accessory dwelling units by right. So now you need to go to the ZBA to get permission for accessory dwelling units. We do allow them, but you have to have a blood relative go into that accessory dwelling unit. That's no longer the case with the state law. We also required 800 square feet, up to 800 square feet of additional space. The new law allows up to 900 square foot of additional space, and the law that we had on the books, or the bylaw we had on the books, only allowed for attached, not detached. And so the new law allows for detached units of up to 900 square feet. Still a lot of questions out there about that. You know, what's considered the livable space? How do you account for parking? But we will have to pass an accessory dwelling unit bylaw that's in conformity with the state law sooner rather than later, actually. And then the other things we want to look at is what I like to call moderate density. A lot of folks are a little alarmed at the MBTA law because it requires a minimum of 15 units per acre in density. So that's pretty high density. Right now we have very low density housing with single family zoning. That's what I would call low density. But I think it's time that we look at, with the remaining, so little remaining land left, we look at moderate density zoning. So for example, a lot of the surrounding towns allow for a half-acre lot with 100 foot of frontage. So that could get us more density in Residence A, And again, since we're pretty close to build out, you wouldn't see a lot of that housing happening, but it's certainly something that we should consider. And again, through the public hearing process, that would play itself out. So you'd get plenty of opportunity to come to the planning board, talk about it. We'd hold public hearings before we go to town meeting to get any zoning bylaws changed. So that's about it.
But making that change, Andy, you're still only, because you've only got 400 acres, that's only 800 additional units, correct?
Well, again, 400 acres is not going to get you 400 units of housing.
Right.
All right.
No, I understand.
Yeah, because of the infrastructure and everything else. No, but it would double what you would be able to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Very good. We do have a lot of questions for Andy. They're coming up once the whole panel's had an opportunity to make their presentations. Did you have a question? Okay, thank you. Bill, what we've all been waiting for. Now, Bill sent me this presentation. I have adapted it for tonight, but this is his picture. Where is that, Bill? Is that? It's Center Street, by the way, is fantastic. I drove it today. Brilliant. No, we can dream, Bill. That's fair. Okay, Bill Chenard.
Thank you, Fraser. Yeah, awesome to see everyone here. I mean, just a great mix of people, from elected officials from our select board, our school committees, advisory, zoning, planning. We even have members of elected officials from other towns with us this evening, former select board members, former school committee members, there's a lot of folks here. And thank you all, even employees, former employees. I'm super excited to see the turnout. I hate speaking to empty rooms. I like to get that feedback from people. Sometimes it's not great feedback, especially with my topic this evening. So I'm going to talk about our street and roadway improvement plan. I'm going to give you a little history. I'm going to talk about philosophy on how we determine roadway conditions, talk about some new software that we're using to do that is going to really change how we do that, and not only is it going to change how we do it, but it's going to save the town a ton of money. I love it when we find these things. I'd like to take credit for this one. I can take partial credit for it because I made it happen, but it was actually brought to me by others. So also going to talk this evening a little bit about the new technologies for paving, specifically hot in place processes, which we're going to be testing in about 3 weeks. So anyway, getting in, pavement management plan, going to talk about what it is and the importance of understanding that. Going to talk about funding sources and costs. There are dramatically different in costs when you talk about different processes in paving. Going to talk about our 2024 schedule, which is compressed. It's all about to happen. Some of it's happening as we speak, and other roadways and other work in town will be happening within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So, and then some final comments, and then obviously questions if anybody has questions. So what is it? What is pavement management, and what is a pavement management plan? It's up there. So it's the process of developing recommendations for the maintenance and repair of pavement to ensure that it remains in good condition. That's a key, good condition, at the lowest possible cost. So that's the first part of it. I'm going to dissect these a bit as we get through it. Pavement management is based on the idea that roads deteriorate at different rates. That's a key factor, because I'm going to talk about how we can save money as a result of that. They deteriorate at different rates throughout their life cycle, and that timely maintenance can extend that life. So let's break that down a little bit. Developing recommendations for maintenance. How do we do that? Well, we take a look at the condition that's out there. There's different terms for it. Some people call it an infrastructure condition rating or a pavement management rating, or there's 3 different things they're all the same thing. It is a number from 1 to 100 that is assigned to a roadway, 1 being, or 0 being really poor, 100 being brand new and awesome. We do that. We have done that historically. We did a pavement management plan. We paid a consultant a lot of money to do it in 2016. We updated that plan in 2018, and then we paid to redo completely that plan in 2022. We are currently using artificial intelligence software to update that plan on our own, not paying a consultant tens of thousands of dollars to do that, and the program is working wonderfully. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So moving on, obviously lowest possible cost. So many of you here, because I know, have seen my fish diagram. And basically what the fish diagram is, as the condition of the roadway worsens, okay, tail of the fish, head of the fish, the cost to do that improvement dramatically increases. I mean, it's a geometric progression in cost as the condition worsens. And the goal of any good pavement management plan, obviously, you want everything in good condition as it says, but you want to catch it before that point crosses. Because once that point crosses, your cost is just skyrocketing at that point. And the procedure and the ways you can fix that and bring your pavement back is more timely, dramatically more expensive. So, and that's the point about the deterioration at different rates. Roadways that have major truck traffic and other things are going to deteriorate much quicker just because of the volume of traffic across those than those that don't have. I mean, you look at Mountain Ave as an example. There's significant traffic there, but it's not going to be the same as Route 53. So how you manage those two roadways is very different. So, and the whole goal is to extend, yeah, I know, those doors drive me nuts, to extend the use, they need to be adjusted, to extend the useful life of the roadway. So if you can extend the useful life by using a crack sealing procedure at, I'll get to the cost a little bit, but you want to do that, as opposed to a complete reclamation, which is, you know, $60, $70, $80, depending upon the roadway, $80 a square yard. So, moving on, yes.
I've moved you on.
So, thank you. So how do we fund these things? There's a number of ways, and I actually missed one. We don't use it typically for payment, and it's just going to be really restricted on how we could possibly use it for payment management, but I will address it when I get there. So biggest funding, although not so much in the last 3 years because we've committed to funding with local town funds. Our biggest funding source historically has been Mass Chapter 90 funding. Chapter 90 funding is aid that's funneled from the federal government through the state to the cities and towns. It's formula-based, and those numbers change, not dramatically, but they change every single year based upon you know, the miles of roadway cities and towns have. And there's a population factor in there and a number of other factors. So I'm just going to give you an indication of where we're at in fiscal 2024. We had 555,288.58. Those formulas, they don't round. I don't understand why. 23, we had 559,000 and change. 22, we had 561,000 and change. excuse me. 21, we had 564,000, almost 565. And then in 2020, we had 565,313. That's the aid we got from the state. That's not all the aid we get from the state. I'm going to address that in one of these other topics. To do roadways. That is roadways that we manage. The state that plays no role other than funding through an application process when we complete the roadways ourselves. We do the bidding, we determine what work is going to be done on the roadways, and we're responsible for the roadway condition index that gets put on those roadways via a consultant, or I'll talk about the software we're using now. Local funding, when I first came, we took a look and that condition was dramatically deteriorating to the point where we were looking at almost $12 million and that we didn't have to address roadways. So we were in the mid-70s at that point, and it was going down. We have stabilized that by adding local funds to that, but we're still not gaining. Some of those roadways are still deteriorating. We're paving them, which brings the average index up. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of the last 4 years. 600,000, 682,000, 600,000, 100,000, and then we also had to in that year include 335,000 because the town is responsible for a percentage share up to 25% of planning to get major TIP-funded projects rolling. That was the Route 36 project. So there was a town kick-in on that. So that's where we're at. Those are the two largest funding sources. My goal, we've exceeded that goal, but my goal, as I committed to bringing our roadway condition index up, was to spend $1 million a year on roadways. And we've exceeded that million. We're closer to $1.2 million or $1.3 million. That is a sum of the Chapter 90 and local funding and any other funding. The remaining funding sources, except for the Transportation Improvement Program, are pretty limited and pretty small. Water enterprise funding, if they do major work on a roadway, the enterprise pays a share of the cost to do that. Utility companies, actually this year, utility companies are kicking in a large share. They're actually paying for West Elm and a percentage of High Street. They're funding that. We're going to manage the paving project, which I think is better than have them pick a contractor and just, we don't have oversight at that point. I enjoy oversight when it comes to paving. We have a staff that's got the capacity to do that and consultants, so I think it's important that we go that route. State special funding, every now and then they'll find a project where it's outside of the TIP or it's on another state project. They did a small project on 53, you might recall, a year ago that wasn't part of the TIP, where they had some extra funds and they threw that in there, but it's a very small number historically over time. And then finally is the TIP. We've gotten more than our fair share. I shouldn't say that. We've done well, but we need to emphasize that we need to start, get back in there and start kicking some butt and get some more money from the state on TIP projects. But we've got over $24 million in the last 6 years from the Commonwealth. So that's a really good number, including $8.9 million for the Route 36 project. So we've done okay. Our neighbors are not even close to those numbers. But you have to do the work. You have to apply. You have to be willing to do the 25% and get those working. We did back off. We're not going to back off. As in the next 2 years, we're going to aggressively go after some more TIP money. So the final one is CPA. If you have a roadway that would meet and there's very few in the town, that would meet the CPA funds. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of one right now because they're very, very limited. I'll think of one as we go on. Moving on, I'm going to talk about pavement management plan costs. And you can see that the first half of my fish on the diagram on the right. If that's the cost, if you drew the line from and add a condition rating and drew the line the other way, you would see that crossover point. So let's talk about this. Roadway condition, you have to monitor it constantly. You have to update it on a regular basis. This new software is going to allow us to do that. We're not going to have to wait that 2-year period or 4-year period for consulting. Super excited there. And different techniques. Understanding those techniques and how to implement them, we believe we can save the town money and keep our roadways up to standards. So going to talk about those, going to talk about costs. These costs are not necessarily the exact costs for us, but they're industry standard for this region. So I included them because that keeps it consistent. So crack sealing, you've seen crack sealing all over Plymouth County. That's when they pour the asphalt into the cracks and you see it all over the place. Chip sealing. Chip sealing, if you're old like me, you probably remember what chip sealing is. If you're young, you probably have no clue what chip sealing is because it kind of fell by the wayside. Back in the 70s, you used to see a lot of chip sealing. And chip sealing is where a truck goes down a road and pours a asphalt emulsion on the roadway, and then a truck goes behind it and dumps a small aggregate, sand, small stone, and then they roll it out. It is an effective process for extending the life of a roadway. In my previous job, believe it or not, first year we would do a complete new roadway, and the second year we would do a chip seal. And the residents would go bonkers because they would say, "What are you ruining the beautiful pavement for by pouring asphalt on it?" Well, when you pour asphalt on it, it's an emulsion, it's liquefied. It fills all those cracks, and you don't get any water infiltration, so that it extends the useful life of that. We won't be doing that here. It's too costly to go that route. Although we may use chip sealing if it's an effective, if we have a roadway that's in relatively good condition where a chip seal would extend the useful life, we would certainly do that at $246 a square yard. Microsurfacing. Microsurfacing is similar in the sense that it has a special slurry. It has chemical additives. It actually has some water in it and some I want to use the word concrete, but it's not concrete. It's the cement that goes into concrete to create a surface. It's a great product, very, very time consuming, and doesn't really have the useful life per se, and it's very difficult if you ever have to cut it. It's difficult to patch it and some other stuff. The next one I'm super excited about. Some folks brought this concept to us. The highway foreman is one of those folks, and Mr. Ciciotti is another. And said, try this. They brought some pamphlets back for some things, and I actually went with the highway foreman up to the North Shore to look at a state project where they were doing hot in place, and I was amazed. I was absolutely blown away. You got the quality of a full mill and overlay for a third of the cost. And the way that works is they heat the existing asphalt. Doesn't work in all roadways, but they heat the existing asphalt up, and then they roll that out into a nice, they go through with almost like a grinding process, roll it out into a nice, what they would call a base, what we would typically call like a base coat, and then you put a final coat over the top of it. It's an amazing process. You're gonna be able to see it. We're gonna do it in 3 weeks here in Pembroke. We'll try to publish when that is. Don't go too close to those things. I was amazed at how warm they are. When you get within 10 feet of them, you can almost burn yourself, so that's pretty scary. Well, you think about it, you're melting asphalt, so you really have to be able to do that. So we're testing that process. If it works, we're going to do that process on more and more roadways, just because you get a high quality road at a very, very cost effective number. Mill and overlay is what we do here in Pembroke for the most part. That's where you grind the existing road and you put a new overlay on the top of it. And you can see that's roughly $30 a square yard, much more expensive than some of the other processes. And then full reclamation, that's what's going on Center Street, where you take everything out, you rework the base, gravel underneath, you do all resetting of your drainage and any infrastructure that's under your roadway, reset your curbing, reset your sidewalks, and then you do a base coat, then a final coat, which is going on, almost going on tonight. It has been going on for 3.5 nights now, so that will be done very, very quickly. I believe tonight is the last night. So the highway foreman and I inspected it the other day, and we are, unlike the base coat, which we made them take up and replace, we are very pleased with the final product, and we actually got an upgraded product that has an epoxy resin within the asphalt, which will extend the useful life, and the town will have an outstanding product. Why do I go over these costs? I go over these costs because if you can push your roadways and catch them in the earlier phases, you can see that you can save a ton of money. And I do it for another reason, because there's a couple roadways that are way down here. And a mile of roadway, to do a mile of roadway like that at $51.18 a square yard, isn't necessarily in the best interest of the town. I know if you live on one of those roadways, you're not very pleased that your road is the worst in town. However, we can do 40 miles of roadway and some of these other techniques for the same cost, and extend the useful life on all of those roadways much longer, and then look for state funding and other funding to get some of the more difficult roadways. So that's why I talk about that, so we understand all of the techniques and why, because someone's going to be in my office tomorrow saying, my road's the worst in town, your condition index says it's the worst in town, why are you not coming at that one first? That's why we're not coming at that one first, because from a cost standpoint, I can extend the useful life of, as I said, a ton more roadways, which is in the best interest overall to the taxpayer. So, moving on to, it's ahead of me.
I'm watching you turn the page.
Okay. Moving on to projects this year. I'm gonna talk about those. Obviously, Center Street's being paved this week with a final coating. There's more work to be done on Center Street. Some of the final curb sets, some of the sidewalk work, although they are doing sidewalk work this week also. It won't be completely done this week, but it absolutely will be, the roadway will be done this week. So being able to drive over that's gonna be awesome. No more banging into those castings, no more hitting those ruts in the roadway. And when it's done, we'll do a final inspection, but so far so good on that. So, talk about next week, Monday, 16th. Yeah, when is the 16th? Monday. We're gonna be starting with 4th Street. That is gonna be a mill and overlay project. We're going to do the milling first. That's going to be from valley to high. And then they'll come in and they'll do a final paving on that. Curve Street, same thing, mill and overlay. As soon as they're done milling for us, they're going to go to curve and mill that and overlay that. Oldham from Center to Pine Tree Lane. Again, mill and overlay. If you drive Oldham, you know it's not great, but you also know it's not great beyond Pine Tree Lane. We're working it. West Elm, this is one that's mostly paid for by the Eversource Gas, and that's from Oldham to Dwelly. That is also a mill and overlay. School Street, that's going to be from Woodbine Ave to Christina Marie Drive. That's the Hot in Place project. That's the end of this month. I believe it's the last week of this month, so check that out. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, as I was. And then obviously I already talked about Center Street. Moving on to some new planning tools, I want to talk about the software that were purchased, where we are one of the first communities in Massachusetts. This product has been used in Europe for many, many, many years, and they've added the artificial intelligence technology to this, where we simply put a smartphone on a mount on a windshield of a DPW truck. As that truck drives the town, it captures the detail. It not only captures the detail about the roadway, it captures the detail about water gates, catch basins, and other infrastructure within the roadway. It captures and gives us a sign inventory. We had an estimate for a sign inventory of $27,000. This software is costing us $17,000 for the entire year. And we're not only getting the roadway condition, as you can see over there, the PCI condition index is a 72 on this roadway, and you can see that's an example of crack sealing right there that you're looking at. It tells you the cracks, it gives you the information, it gives you the pothole information, it gives you a sign inventory. It also gives you a sign, tells you what signs and the location via GPS coordinates that are faded, signs that are dirty. When we were training last week on this, we pulled up a stop sign and there was mud all over it. That's a simple fix for DPW, but unless someone calls that in, we don't know about it. This software is going to allow us to identify those and create work orders in the system. It also allows us to track the roadways that we're working on and plan those roadways, so we don't have to go out there with a wheel and measure it. It is an amazing tool we were lucky that we're one of the first Massachusetts communities to get it, so we got a great bargain, and we got a 3-year contract at that great bargain. Even at the full cost, it's still a cost saver to the town, because you're not paying engineers to go out there with those wheels and measure those, to go out there and write down and capture all of your roadway problems. What's super nice about it, if someone comes in and says, hey, in front of my house is a major pothole, we can pull it up right there in front of us on a computer screen. And we can say, yep, you're right, create the work order and go fix it. Very excited about this. It's going to, not only is it going to make our database better, but it's going to save us money in the long term. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And then I've talked about the next one, obviously testing more efficient techniques. We've done some crack sealing. It's been a while since we've done chip sealing. Other projects have some microsurfacing in town. I believe Water Street has got some microsurfacing on it. But we haven't done hot in place here. So we're gonna test it this fall, and if it works, we're gonna roll it out as a technique that we're gonna use. Not all roadways are gonna qualify for hot in place. If it's deteriorated beyond a point where you can actually capture that, put it back down and cover it, you can't use hot in place. But there's a lot of roadways in town where we can use hot in place, where today we're doing, a basic mill and overlay on that. So I just want to point that out. As it says there, it's 2.5 times the cost. Mill and overlays currently is 2.5 times the cost of hot in place. And those numbers can differ too. There's an index that the Commonwealth publishes on asphalt prices, and they go up and down. Right now, they're on a slightly downward trend, which we're perfect timing for us to be doing some paving work. It's not a significant savings. Over all this work, it's probably a $1,500 savings, but $1,500 in our pocket so we can do something else. Maybe that is a piece of sidewalk or something else. So that's all I have. I'm here for questions. Obviously, there's some that people have. So.
Sure, appreciate that, Bill. We'll save the questions until after. Before we move on to water, Jimmy, thank you for coming. Did you win?
No, unfortunately,
Oh,
was getting my butt kicked in a golf
I'm
match.
sorry to hear that. Well, perhaps we can uplift you during the evening. Okay, so Dan Sullivan on water.
Thanks for inviting me, Fraser. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
So at the Pembroke Water Division, our goal is to provide potable drinking water per Mass DEP regulations, provide sufficient water for firefighting needs. We do this through a network of 135 miles of water main, 1,000 fire hydrants to maintain water quality, 3 water storage tanks, 4 groundwater sources, 1 filtration plant, and 2 pumping stations. A common comment we have is, do we have enough water? So this graph here shows us our permitted daily demand, what DEP allows us to pump. Per our permit, we're allowed to pump 1.7 million gallons a day on average. So the winter months, we'll be pumping under 1 million, but that allows us to go up to, say, 3 million in the summertime. So it's an average. The orange line is our monthly pumpage for 2023. As you can see, in the summer months and even into September when it's hot and dry, that's our usage does increase, but we were well below the 1.7 million that were permitted on a daily demand. The highest day we pumped last year was 1.9 million, I believe that number represents. In past years, we've gone up as high as 2.6. So while DEP issues water permits by average, we do have to be able to hit peak demands, which can sometimes more than double what an average day is based off of weather, drought situations. People tend to use more water outside, which is expected. I think you can go to the next one. Sure. So currently, this is a list of our sources that we have online. And it represents how much we can pump currently. So right now, we have the ability to pump 2.34 million gallons a day. The firm capacity, the next column there, we always need a plan for a worst case scenario. The likelihood of a well going down, we need to know if we can still meet that demand. So when you take off your highest producing well, you can see that we are only at 1.4 right now. However, we did reestablish the Brockton Interconnect, which could supply us upwards of 1 million gallons a day for redundancy. So while our wells currently, the highest one was offline, wouldn't meet it, we can purchase water from Brockton. Going forward, we are looking to develop the Swanberg property. We're in the process right now going through planning and conservation to get that online. That will provide us an extra 247 gallons a minute, which is 350,000 gallons a day. And we are also proceeding with developing Edgewood bogs, which we will hopefully permit for 1 million gallons a day. As you can see, once those two are online, we'll have the ability to pump up to 4.18 million and have a firm capacity at 3.19, which we haven't crossed that 3 million threshold on a high day, any day. So along with that pumpage, we also have the storage tanks, which hold over 1.5 million, which gives us a buffer. So even if you were to exceed, you had a heavy day and you had to pump down, we still have that buffer in the tanks to meet and supply fire needs. A couple of notes. Like I said, back in 2014, that was one of our highest days on record. That was 2.6 million we pumped that day. The 1.7 million per day average that were permitted, on average during the summer right now, we're doing about 1.5, I'd say. Well 1, so the reason we're developing Swanberg and Edgewood Bogs is well 1 was taken offline in 2009 due to poor water quality. It was officially abandoned as of a few months ago. We had the building demoed. So with these new sources coming on, it'll make up that capacity that we lost over the years. Swanberg is hopefully online fall of 2026. That might be pushed back to spring of 27 at this point. Edgewood Bogs, if everything keeps going as planned, 2028. And we are also looking at a replacement well 4. Well 4 currently we can pump 400 gallons a minute. It was originally rated for 700. So because of the decline over the years, we are looking at a replacement for that source.
So the future capacity, Dan, that's the timeline for that future capacity is, the maximum is towards 2028, is that correct?
Yes, so we're in the testing phase of Edgewood Bogs. It was previously permitted, so it's favorable that it'll go through. So if everything continues as planned, 2028, we would hope to have that online.
Right. But that's 2028, but that's 694. If you take the 694, you're increasing the capacity dramatically by the fall of 2026. Is that correct?
Fall of 2026, we're hoping to have Swanberg on, which is the 247.
Yeah.
So at that point, we would be able to hit the average day demand. The extra, that 247 would give us, like I said, an extra 350,000 gallons a day. So on top of that, 1.4 would put us at 1.7, which is what we're permitted for. So in theory, in 2026, we'll be able to hit the permitted average again that we lost.
Okay, shall I move on?
Yeah. So to rectify, obviously, dirty water is a hot topic. Water bans, water restrictions. The water restrictions are part of our Water Management Act permit. Everything we do is regulated by DEP. When we can pump, how much we can pump. One of the biggest things, DEP's Department of Environmental Protection, is about preserving the water and our resources. So they do require us to issue, they mandate that we have water restrictions every May through September. Ours are pretty strict right now. As we proceed on developing things, we hope we can lax that up a little bit while still meeting the DEP goals, which is our gallons per day per person, which has to be under 65 gallons per person. Right now we're at 50, so we're well below that. And then keeping on top of our unaccounted for water that doesn't get billed to customers. Part of developing a plan, we will be under contract hopefully next month to do a water master plan. The goals of that will be identifying water main replacement and rehabilitation on many unlined cast iron mains, most of which we've identified. We just want to work with that consultant and prioritize which ones need to be done first and evaluate if the main should be upsized to provide more capacity to the areas of town, especially areas that have had a lot of buildings such as 53, as Andy mentioned. All that is verified by our consultants. Anybody that wants to build in town, we do make them fill out a water availability permit, which our consultant will do a fire flow test, make sure we'll be able to meet fire flow demands in that area, and evaluates how much demand that development will use. Specifically, that the country club, they just recently did it. We only anticipate 23,000 gallons a day of increased usage, which, as you can see, pumpage-wise, that only about 8 minutes a day more pumpage for us to meet that demand. Bringing in that new growth, though, helps pay down all the capital improvement projects that we do. So everything we bring in, there's fees for them to tie in. That'll help us pay down the debt we incur to do all these improvements. Also, we'll obviously be looking at future water demands, water storage capacity, and meeting future water regulations. Because we fall under DEP and the federal government, there's constantly changes in the regulations that we have to meet, and they're always, looking for new contaminants to make sure the water's safe for all the residents. I think that about covers it, Fraser.
Terrific, Dan, thank you. I do actually have an additional slide that I think is important for the residents to see.
Sure.
You've touched on this. This isn't because you're failing. This is regulations from state or whoever, but it's not about capacity, correct?
Correct.
These signs.
So part of our Water Management Act permit is protecting the natural resource. Unnecessary waste is frowned upon. Any community that does exceed, like I said, we do have goals hitting less than 65 gallons per person per day, unaccounted for water under 10%. Whenever we exceed anything like that, which the per capita we're not in excess of, there are penalties that DEP would impose on a community. And they would try and force you to have stricter water restrictions, which is put on the department to enforce.
So these signs are not put up because you can't deliver water, just to be clear.
Correct, yes. We
There
can
you
meet the demand now, and like I said, with the Brockton interconnect, a lot of communities have interconnections between them for emergency purposes, so that way you can always supply and meet your needs.
And I'm going to bring a question in. The Brockton water
Yep.
that we're moving to Brockton, it's not, what kind of water is that, Dan, that we're sending
So
to Brockton?
that's surface water. That's from
Surface
Silver
water,
Lake.
okay.
All of our wells are groundwater wells. Most of them, I'd say about 75 feet below the surface of the surface. So we don't particularly want surface water. We actually touch base on that at planning board. So when you have surface water, there's a whole nother slew of treatment techniques and processes that you have to follow. So groundwater is your best bet, providing safe water. You don't have to worry about coliform. And there's a lot less risk of contamination with a source well.
Thank you, Dan. I think it's, I'm sorry. Over to Bill.
I think Dan's being kind on that, having worked in water systems that have used surface water in the past. Surface water sucks, folks. I mean, there's a lot going on with E. coli and other things when you're pumping water out of these lakes. Having groundwater wells, even if you have brown water, which we're trying to eliminate, the water quality here is so much better than what we would have if we had surface water.
Thank you, Bill. Let's move on to zoning. We only have one slide on zoning, and I actually wanted to share with everyone. This is from a Massachusetts website, and it's just making the point that our zoning laws can be overridden by developers if we are under 10% of 40B. And we have to be aware of that. We have things forced on us if we're under 10%. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's right. How you doing? Chris McGrail, Vice Chair, Pembroke Zoning Board. Fraser is 100% right. So when I first come on, maybe like 4 years ago, I sat at the library for the River Marsh hearing, an absorbent amount of units over on just the other side of Water Street, also known as on the North River. The only registered scenic waterway in the state of Massachusetts. And I was, against it for so many reasons. They wanted to put a wastewater treatment center on the North River, which I don't know if anybody's ever been down there or fished it or hiked it or kayaked it. It's amazing. And I was dead set against this project, right? And as well was one of the other members on the board, Arthur Boyle, and we voted it down, right? For so many reasons, and everybody in the back of the room that was all lived on Water Street and Cross Street, and they were fighting. They were full of fight, So how am I going to tell these people no? You can't fight this fight for So we voted it down. But what happens when it's voted down? Then it goes before the Housing Commission, right? And then the Housing Commission, under the current administration, pretty much says, here you go, you can do whatever you want. So I'm not saying our hands are tied, by the state, for a lot of reasons. Yes, we need, there is a crunch on land. There is, people need places to go. But it's such a, I don't know, I look at the internet, I don't really partake too much on the internet other than just like reading, see what's going on in town. And there's just a bunch of haters throwing rocks at the zoning board needs to shut this down, the zoning board needs to shut this down. No, we don't. Like, you need to go to the polls, and vote, and and take part in your government other than just throwing rocks at people that think they can change something that really can't, because our hands are tied on a state level. So I just it pains me every time I look at it. You know, it's like I didn't do anything. I just get up this morning to go to work and try to earn, for my family. It's not a paid position. There is no kickbacks. I'm not a rich politician. Neither is anybody else that sits on the board with me. It's just, it's infuriating. So I'm for 40B. If it's and that's one thing we have to. I don't like anybody stepping on my toes either. Like, my land is my land. I bought it. I want to do what I want with it. I want my neighbors to do what they want with it within reason, because I want things my way, right? So that's why everybody gets mad about 40Bs, Plain Street's a new one. But another thing to remember is we need to get in the driver's seat. So it being under 10% is where it gives the developers the pretty much carte blanche to do what they wish, where they wish. So currently, Andy, what are we at, 8.7, 8.5?
Well, we're a bit higher than that, and when permits are pulled for the two projects that, one has not been approved by
Right.
ZBA, but the other has, we'll be closer, but as we add housing units over time, we kind of take a step back. So I think we're at around 9.8. Once we get the new units in, closer to 10, we'll have to do the calculation again. See where we are.
And what happens, which Andy had made privilege to me, was, so River Marsh got voted down, and then it went to housing court, and then they got whatever they wanted. They got approval. They're going to go ahead with the project whenever Brian Murphy and River Marsh LLC goes forward with it. We don't get credit for that percentage until they get their occupancy permit. So that's the same look I had. Across the street at Shepherd's, because it passed when the building permits are pulled, we get credit for that percentage. So everybody's like, well, all these 40Bs going through, where are the numbers? Why haven't the numbers changed? Well, that's why. So once the Shepherd's permits are pulled, we'll get credit for those. Once River Marsh gets built or whatever and they get their occupancy permits, we'll get those. But at the same time, there's other development happening in town. So the more development, the more affordable housing you need. It's like, I eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat. Like, it's a never-ending cycle. But either way, so I just wanted to touch on that real quick. See if I have anything else. Anything else, Raj, or no?
No, I think Bill wants to.
Sure.
Throw his hand in.
So the moral of the story is, find developers who are willing to work with the town, such as the gentleman next to me, and get to 10%. Get our housing, get to 10%, but get it in a manner that we want.
Yeah.
So.
Because we can still approve a 40B if it's 10%, so we're right on the cusp, like, oh crap, well, somebody's gonna build a subdivision over here, there's this 40B that we like, maybe we can work with this guy, guy, developer, woman, whatever, to keep ourselves in the driver's seat, because right now we're just along for the ride.
Great, thank
all
you. Moving on to Mr. Bristol. Jim, I'll put your slide up here just so that you can, I left the picture on there just in case you didn't show up. But
I wore the same outfit, so you'd recognize it.
looks like it was
terrific, appreciate it.
Here's why you lost.
So, Jimmy, if you just want to introduce yourself, and,
Sure.
and there's a lot on that slide.
Yeah.
But then after that, if it's all the same with you, I've actually got the Matakesett Village and the golf club. So if you could just give us some words
Sure.
on that as well, so
Yeah.
the residents of Pembroke understand your role, what's going on, but also the fact that the numbers that we're talking about, when the Matakesett Village goes through, there'll be other developments that knock those numbers down that you're doing as well. So, people have to be aware of, as Chris said, the give and take. But anyhow, the floor's yours, Jim.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. I recognize some of you out there from our permit process in Pembroke over the last 4 or 5 years between the Country Club and Matakesett Street, the old Shepherd's Funeral Home across the street. We have had the the fortunate experience of developing something that is a real win-win. Typically, when you're in front of a town trying to permit anything, we get stuff thrown at us, and it started that way when we first came in with Pembroke Country Club. It was not the most comforting crowd, and we worked to educate folks that what we're trying to do is save the golf course, propose a housing component that the town really doesn't have, a 55 and over community that mimics what we did up in Weymouth and we're doing in other communities on the South Shore. That is a huge tax generator for the town and a relatively low traffic impact, relatively low sewer water impact, and generally, once it's built, it's a great asset for the town and saves the golf course. So the golf course will be able to do a new restaurant, new function facility, make improvements to the buildings on site, make improvements to the golf course, and that's all only doable because of the housing component that gets permitted. So we had several folks that were selectmen, planning board members, conservation folks that came up and toured what we were doing in Weymouth, and once they sat there and saw the way it operated, we almost got a unanimous vote at town meeting. And the first meeting I was at, I had people behind me going, "Go back to Weymouth." So it came a long way in a very short period of time, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. One of the biggest delays we've had wasn't so much the town, but we wanted to go out, make sure we could save the 18-hole golf course. And so we had some neighbors approach us that had land, and we approached other neighbors so that we kind of exhausted what the potential of the project overall could be. So we went from 169 acres to 244 acres. So that allowed us to keep an 18-hole golf course that will be just as long and hopefully a higher quality when we get done. Anybody that's played Pembroke Country Club that I know has always loved it. Some complain that it's long. We'll introduce some forward tees to be a little friendlier to older folks and younger folks and ladies, and so that everybody enjoys the experience there. It's a beautiful piece of property. One of the nicest properties I've ever worked on. So
I'm going to jump to that slide, Jimmy.
sure.
You're talking about it. This is the plan, the overview of what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah. So the majority of the housing comes through the center of the site. The maintenance building is up off of Dwelly Street. The main entrance will be where it exists today off of West Elm. The 3 buildings that you see off of the parking lot. One is the big Augusta building that exists today that will be where we charge the carts. There'll be some event suites there, so when folks have a golf tournament or a wedding function, something at the function facility, people will be able to stay overnight there. So that's kind of a neat thing that got added to the design. The center building is where the current restaurant is, and that one we're planning to tear down and build a new restaurant on the first level and function facility up on the second floor. And then the third bigger building that you see there is an 8-unit, which the zoning allowed some multifamily units. So it's 162 single-family detached homes in that one 8-unit building just off the parking lot. The new driving range is the white that you see down at the bottom of the screen. There's probably 3 or 4 holes that get redone. There's probably 5 or 6 that get new tee boxes and that kind of thing, but there's probably about 13 holes that we won't even touch, so other than to make improvements with cart path, bunkers, et cetera, that kind of thing. So there's some housing off of Hazelwood. That'll be a separate community with an emergency through. It won't be a separate community, it'll still be part of the 55 and over, but it will be accessed off of Hazelwood. We had some pushback there during the permit process. There was formerly a single-family subdivision that would have been regular homes that was approved in that area. That was a greater density. It was actually, I think, 21 house lots that got approved back in, I want to say, 2012. It was quite a while ago, but so this should be a lesser traffic impact to that neighborhood. And then there's another single access property over off of Dwelly up in the top right of the plan. I think that's about it for Pembroke Country Club.
Shall
We're
I?
hoping, right now, permit-wise, we're 100% done with the town. Planning Board special permit, order of conditions with the Conservation Commission. The two things that are holding us up right now are at the state level. There's a MEPA process where they kind of globally look at everything. That's probably got another 3 to 6 months. And the package treatment plant for the septic, which will go under the parking lot, is about another 6 months. We got the preliminary approvals with DEP and working on designs for the final. And that's about 46,000 gallons, the 23,000 new that is the housing, and then there's about 23 that the restaurant function hall and those facilities will generate. That's kind of a repurpose of the existing structures.
Let's talk about Matakesat Village.
So as part of the permit process and the zoning that we received at the country club, the affordable component could be built on-site at the country club. It could be built off-site elsewhere in Pembroke, or some sort of payment in lieu. So during the permit process and the assembly of the acreage over at the country club, we had the opportunity to look at this site, the Shepherd Funeral Home. A broker called us about it, and we said, geez, that might be a good spot to do an off-site friendly 40B, where the town gets to count all 66 units towards the 10% threshold that you've heard folks discuss this evening. And that's what we ended up doing. It's also age restricted, so it's predominantly just one-bedroom homes, apartments basically. And we introduced a tavern as we were going through the process. We shrunk the units a little bit because of construction costs and interest rates where they've gone since we started. They were 4%, and as we're going through it, they're 8 and 9%, so it becomes a little bit more difficult to pencil to the banks. So we shrunk the units a little bit, changed it to 3 buildings where it was 2 buildings initially, and we added a tavern because we kind of looked around downtown Pembroke and said, geez, where are our residents going to eat? There's really nothing right downtown. So it was well received by the board, and we're excited to partner with, we work with Will O'Connell's my partner, manages Granite Links up in Quincy. He runs the Weather Vane Tavern for us in Weymouth. He runs the Range Bar and Grill for us in Hingham. So he's excited about doing this one as well as the stuff at the country club. So we've got a good team there that has a lot of experience, and we're excited about both projects. This one, we're just green-lighted the architect and the structural guys on the plans, so that we should be able to file for foundation permits and subsequently building permits this fall, winter, and get this one rolling, because I'm glad to hear that it counts once the building permit is issued.
That's what I was told.
Yeah. well,
No, it's true.
Yeah, so that's great news for the town.
Not so much for the other.
But right, and we're talking to a few potential partners on that, that have built that type of product. It's a little bit new to us, but if we have to build it ourselves, we will. And we think it'll be a win-win and great addition to the downtown area. And hopefully we see you all at the tavern at some point.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
Yep.
I think what's left is Peter Foreman. Peter, I'm just going to talk through this slide before you come in talking about our neighbours, because I pulled some figures for us just to look at how we stand in the county of Plymouth. So when we look at the house sales in 2024 and the house sales in compared with 2023, and obviously we haven't finished all of 2024, and I know we have some realtors in the room that have already debated with me the validity of how I've expressed this, but basically the share of Pembroke's housing sales. So in 2023, 489 homes were sold, and that gave us a share of something like 3.6% of the county. Right now, with 151 sales, we are down below 3%. There's an 18% drop in our share of the county. And I've just put all the other towns within the state. Hanover obviously is inflated by the fact that there is that big development where the mall was. But when we look at, so that's the home sales, 489 to 151. The average prices, however, in Pembroke, they're up 631,000 is the average price of a home in Pembroke, up 4.5%. Pre-COVID, 2019, we were 430,000. So that's a 46.5% jump in the value of homes. But we're still not, the average for the county is still high, much, much higher than that. And the county has grown by 8%. So I don't have a conclusion or a statement to make about that. These are just the facts. So I'm presenting the facts and then handing over to Peter. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not quite sure what to make out of all that, because that would be existing home sales, not new construction.
I think they're combined because they're deeds from the county, so it's a combination.
This is data taken from the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
So it'll be all.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me. The South Shore Chamber of Commerce, if you're not familiar with it, is a regional chamber of commerce. We view about 25 communities as being part of a economic region, and in addition to obviously serving the member businesses, we look at where we think the South Shore is with our economy and how it's going to grow, and where the business community might help lead it. About 8 years ago, we did a deep dive looking at the region and found that the regional economy, and therefore our municipalities, were facing some big problems with economic competitiveness compared to the rest of the state in the Metro Boston area. And the biggest threat we saw were our demographics. We were older and aging faster than the rest of metropolitan Boston, which presents a problem when you're thinking about who is going to be here to fill jobs, who is going to be here to attract companies as a workforce, who's going to be able to service us all, who grew up here or are going to die here with no workforce. And we found the answer to that was really about housing. And when we talk about housing, we got behind an agenda of trying to promote a lot more housing on the South Shore. It's important to think about what housing means. We did not look at it primarily as shelter the way most people did, and we didn't really look at it in terms of cost, because any new construction is expensive. What we looked at is the housing product. And most of the South Shore, we found, is very rich in large lot, single-family detached homes, the very traditional homes that, you know, we're all used to and love and don't want to see changed. And a lot of that is because of the way towns have zoned. And that zoning was, in many cases, used to prohibit any growth, particularly on the South Shore, because we had so much growth during the urban exodus, Boston flight back in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of towns, for many reasons, started having a lot of zoning restrictions. And so what we see is we have a housing product that predominantly conforms to anti-growth zoning and not housing product that conforms to what the market is looking for. And by the market, I don't mean developers looking to cash in and make a buck, although there's nothing wrong with that. But it's what people are looking for. And the people we looked at most carefully, or particularly at, were two groups: the downsizing baby boomers, those of us who bought the 3 or built the 3, 4 bedroom homes, empty nesters. What are they looking to downsize to? And then the younger people out of Boston, who we hope will be the typical move: come to Boston for college. It's great when you're in your 20s, and then you want to move out. And where do you look for? And they're looking for something very similar. They're looking for more compact housing, smaller maintenance, smaller houses, looking for houses or homes near activities, interesting areas, amenities. And that's why we got on this push of trying to change zoning and supporting particular types of housing products in the area. And those are mostly multi-family housing or small detached compact housing, like we're going to see at the golf course, and housing that is used as an economic development strategy in itself. And that means using it as mixed use, trying to have housing so that you can have some commercial development nearby, not necessarily or always in the same building, but nearby. So getting that, something near transit in many cases, because that helps draw people down. Housing that's used to help communities with placemaking, because what people are looking for are communities where they are kind of interesting. Not everybody wants to live on an old developed farm with nothing around it. I happen to like it, but not everybody does. And so we're trying to get that housing that helps keep the downsizers, those people who have been have made their lives here, been successful, who are rich in talent, even if they're retiring. They've got a lot of talent and expertise. And then those younger people. And that placemaking for towns, you know, helps attract people. And the towns need to be attracting people, particularly now. The post-COVID huge federal state aid to municipalities is coming to an end. And towns are going to have a harder time, I think, looking to manage their affairs. Not necessarily manage growth. The growth is going to help pay for some of that. Because the equation has changed from, I used to be in the legislature back in the 80s. The equation's changed with housing. Housing used to be a cost burden on communities because most of us were thinking of 3, 4 kids. Nobody's thinking of 3 or 4 kids anymore. You know, it's 1 or 2. People aren't having families the way we used to as a society. And so what we find is the old housing, which might have impacted local services, now it doesn't bring as many children with it. There aren't as much impact, and they tend to be, the larger developments tend to be net tax gains for municipalities. So that's a good thing. We're seeing 3 kinds of towns in the South Shore, and I think probably statewide. there are towns that are using housing as part of their own economic development strategy, doing something like the downtown project here, which normally I would like. I don't like what the Brookfields are doing on Matakeesit, because the Shepherd Funeral Home, J.J. Shepherd, was my great-grandfather. And I don't know why that money didn't come down to the family. I don't know how it ended up getting out of there. He should have passed it down to us. So I'm checking with my mother on that. But it's a beautiful project, and it's a way to find out, it's a way to develop a center and bring in more amenities and services, even though Stop and Shop is closing. The fact that you're gonna have more people there, and the fact that you have something interesting like the new community center and the library, it's a beautiful, it's got all the great ingredients to help with local development. But those towns that are moving forward, thinking about how they use housing as a strategy, or as Chris said, getting in the driver's seat. Sometimes it's a defensive strategy. They want to have the friendly 40Bs or whatever and have more control over what may happen with proposals in other parts of a town that they might not want. Those towns are doing well, and they're pretty smart. Then there are some towns that are trying to promote some of this. They have legitimate issues, usually around water, wastewater capacity. And that's a real concern. We have candidates here and local officials. Even as much as we promoted housing, we have had conversations with the governor and the administration that things like the MBTA law, we get the principle of it, but they have to understand that many suburban communities have legitimate water, wastewater issues, and they can't be looking to have the suburbs use housing, even if they want to, if they can't get some of that infrastructure help. And the administration's aware of that. That's a legitimate issue. Those towns are trying to break through, get some housing, and do it. But they need some help and are being stymied a little bit. And then there's the third group, and that's the towns that are trying to duck it completely, mostly putting their heads in the sand, thinking that the future of their town is no change, no growth. And that's actually a way a town declines, when you don't have any change or growth. And they're gonna try to buck state law and state trends. And what they're gonna end up finding is they're gonna probably get housing anyway. It's just not gonna be the kind of housing they might want, and it may not be in the location they want, and it may not be used and integrated into a town master plan the way they had hoped. And they're gonna end up losing in the long run. But those are the three towns we see generally around the state, of the three types of towns. And we've seen some great progress on how towns are using this for economic development. Hanover, with Hanover Crossing, helping revive a ghost town mall. Kingston, with the Kingston Collection, introducing housing there, same purpose. It's reinventing property and activity to help drive commercial activity. So lots of great examples around the South Shore of towns that are doing the right thing, towns that are hoping that this housing crisis is going to go away, and towns that are using housing in very different strategies. So, and Pembroke's doing a great job. I was fascinated. I've never heard a town manager have so much detail about road construction. And what's really interesting in that, other than you must have a really boring life, what's interesting is most town managers have incredible detailed knowledge about their town departments. Road work is construction. And I think one of the problems we have is so many people in local government don't have an appreciation and a deep understanding of the cost of development and what happens when you delay things and drag it out for years unnecessarily and go to court and what that does to the cost of housing. Not so much the cost of commercial development, because what happens is commercial developers say, out of here, there are other towns that want us. We're not going to sit around and litigate with you forever over commercial development and increase the cost of that exponentially. We'll go elsewhere. And housing development's a little different. People will stick around and can force it on you, but again, with the wrong results. So kudos to you to having that kind of understanding of the cost of development, certainly as it relates to roads. And my guess is you probably have that in relation to other physical development as well. So.
Tell the truth, Bill.
But you're doing a great job, so keep it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. We're going to move on to question time. We're actually on schedule, give or take 4 minutes. We're going to have the questions that have been proposed to us by the residents. I've put them into category order, so Dan's going to go first. I will probably not. The town folk will see the questions that have been asked, but I think most of them are being answered. So we'll rattle through these fairly quickly. And if we have time at the end, we'll open it up to the audience that's here present. I know 1 or 2 of you have already spoken to me and they've got questions that you didn't get emailed in time. But before I do that, I do want to thank the panelists for attending tonight. There was a lot of work put into the presentations prior to tonight, and I think it shows. And I'm very grateful for you all coming on behalf of the town and the chamber. I'm also very grateful for a full house of select board members here tonight, so appreciate you all showing up. Thank you. If I can turn some of the questions on to you, I will. We've also got some state representatives here, so we're grateful for you attending, and good luck in your races. So let's get on to the questions. Water. So, no question. Oh, hang on. When is the town of Pembroke going to take action to rectify our serious water issues? I really think, that's a great question, but I think you've covered that fairly well, Dan. So I'm going to, unless there's any objections. Oh, objection coming in already.
Yeah, I think so.
Should we share a mic?
Oh, do we need it? I'm pretty loud.
You're not recorded, though.
Oh, okay. That's true.
This work? Okay.
So I think what Dan was talking about before was a lot about well and supply.
Yep.
And you alluded to the fact that we're about to do a master plan on water mains. And I do think it's worth noting the distinction there. So Old Colony Planning Council, with the support of South Shore Chamber and the legislature and the EDA, has a regional water study underway that Dan Sullivan's been a part of, getting local input on. And that is looking at how any of this development, how any changes in growth over time are going to impact our environment, our groundwater, our watersheds, right? So it's looking at all of those supply and quality of water itself. And we've put a lot of work into that. But I think that when people are saying rectify our serious water issues in town, most of the time what they're really talking about is water mains. Mm-hmm. You know, we did have a year where we had really serious shortage, right? We were down a well, we had some issues, and we were short water. But for the most part, right now, I think what people are upset about is the brown water and the fact that you're going to have to replace some water mains to really start to deal with that, unless there's something else, Dan, that you guys have in place that is going to help with that in the short term. But it might help to give people a sense of the timeline to come up with a master plan and start to put that into effect. I would also note that a lot of our well issues we were able to take care of in part because of things like ARPA and federal money that was coming through COVID, as Peter was alluding to. And that really helped us do that without as much impact on ratepayers. But when you start talking about water mains, unless a new funding system comes in, that's going to be a new category. So I just think when people are asking that question, they may be asking about the second half that is sort of future.
Sure. So we already have a couple of water main projects in the works. High Street, I'm sure anybody that lives on High Street, that's a big problem area. We've already done survey work out there. We just did test borings. So we're in the engineering, the design phase of the project. We're hoping to go out to bid this winter and start construction in the spring. We're also addressing Oldham Street from Pine Tree. That's why they're stopping paving at Pine Tree. From Pine Tree down to Hazelwood. West Elm is stopping at Dwelly because we got to go from Dwelly to the Hanover Town Line, along with up Dwelly, stopping to Shire, Stanford Hill. So we're trying to get all these water main projects in the works, and then we're going to address the rest with the master plan. Like I said, looking at sizing and kind of which projects go best together and flow together. In doing that too, we're hoping to apply for more SRF loans to get low interest loans on them. A lot of that's going towards mitigation of PFAS. PFAS is a hot topic, but we are going to try to apply for that, and that's a process. So we need to get some water main jobs in the works, and then going forward, we're going to try and get SRF loans, and then we're also going to be looking at a community block grant, hopefully, when we do the Oak Street tank, because that's up in the area where it's zoned for the MBTA housing. Discolored water, like you said, that's the hot topic. That's from the unlined cast iron pipes. That has been already started to be addressed. So there was an abandonment on Center Street that was unlined cast. Most of it, there was some other pipe material. And then Barker Street. Now we're moving on to High Street, Oldham, West Elm. So we are going after the problem pipe materials. It's going to take time. It's about $2.5 million per mile. So it's going to take time and money.
Thank you, Dan. I think that's actually the next question about the old water pipes being replaced. So it's going to take time. It's about $2.5 million per mile.
Yep.
And you're working on it.
Yeah, and with that, we'll have new roadways, new hydrants. When we do a water main project, we're going to upgrade any responsibility of the water system. So our water services from the main to the homeowner side, which can have leaks, those will all be new fire hydrants, new water main, obviously, and hopefully get 100 years plus life expectancy out of it.
There is a question being asked, and it's coming up later, but I'm going to ask it now. When Bill's talking about a road project where he's digging up the road, there's obviously some coordination with the work you're doing, so you're not duplicating effort.
Exactly. So obviously, when we do we're going to disturb the road pretty severely. So when we're done, it'll be a new roadway. So we are working with the DPW director and highway foreman to make sure our project is getting done roughly a year in advance of any future paving, just to make sure we're in coordination. We're not, ripping up new roads. Like you said, we had that issue with the gas company, but they're working with us, giving us the funds so that we can pave after we do the water main work on High Street.
Terrific. You've just saved some questions there.
Another question.
Yes, sorry, Dan.
What Dan was on there? Dan, while you're on the subject, could you just talk about directional flushing, and that's the temporary solution for the brown water?
Yeah, so the unidirectional flushing program, it does need to be conducted twice a year. What it does is we are able to flush a system in the most cost-effective way and timely way. Actually, from the first last fall when we did the first completion to this spring, we used 25% less water because of it, and it shows that the program's working. So the unidirectional flushing program is going to clean any sediment that's in the pipe out, which causes discolored water when there's times of high flow or fires or illegal usage of a hydrant. Gets that sediment out, and it also gives us data to target problem areas. So these unlined cast iron pipes have a tendency to tuberculate, so minerals deposited on the inside and this corrosion of the pipe walls. So when we're flushing, we can see the decline of flow available in an area, so we can target more problematic areas. And with High Street specifically, it's a frequent caller for discolored water. We do see the flows are dramatically lower, and we get that information from the flushing program. So we continue to use that as a tool to target areas that need work, along with customer complaints, and it also is the best way to flush a system while preserving as much water as possible and collecting data.
Thank you, Dan. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question or comment. Thank you. First of all, as a resident of Pembroke for 47 years, I want to thank the Chamber and everybody who participated in this meeting. It's unbelievable what's going on right now. It's been a great meeting. And I have a concern about water, too. Many years ago, being involved in town, I sponsored an article that protected the groundwater in a certain area from pollution. It was on the books. And we have great water. And I did kind of a paper on that. And one of the things I talked about was protecting our water from other towns. We know what happened to Silver Lake and the other ponds, how we lost it, that water. And we have great groundwater. And one of the things I said is, what's going to happen if down the road other towns try getting our groundwater? We have talked now about looking into the region. So I guess the question is, how do we make sure that being part of a study or part of a group, all of a sudden we don't find ourselves saying, oh, we're going to allow somebody else to use some of our groundwater too, and end up like Silver Lake, or end up when we join the MBTA system. So I have concerns that we don't let this go to a point where all of a sudden we're part of a consortium and we're allowing some of our good water to go to other towns, as it's happened in the past.
I understand the question, Bob, and I appreciate it. I'm not sure it's one for Dan, and it's actually one for the select board. Where's Tracy? I mean, it's not...
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Because the Chamber's beginning to look at this water issue, and, Bob, I wouldn't necessarily look at it about sharing water supply and transferring it from town to town, but everyone talks about water as the town's water supply. And actually, no town does have a single water supply. Every community I know of is drawing from a larger common watershed that crosses town boundaries. And the big question we have as we look at the future of our regional economy is, how do you protect water resources for sustainability? That's not just having enough water supply for use and growth, but how do you protect the water supply so it's going to be around for a long time, and you get the natural resources and all of that. So we're hoping, and I'm launching this because I leave the Chamber at the end of this year, so I'm launching it for somebody else to do. You know, Pete Brown's on our Chamber board. Mike Murphy is here. He's on our Economic Development Corporation, which helped fund the water study. And what we're trying to start as a business organization is, how do we bring business and governments together to start looking at their common watershed resource and protect that? And that's the type of intermunicipal dialogue we're hoping to see, not so much a question of who's going to pipe whose water to what other town and steal that. So I hope people start looking at that more than thinking about who's going to take my water, because you're taking it from a source that feeds another town.
I was on the master planning committee. I'm on the planning board. My name's Stephen Roundtree. I just want to say that, like, many, many years ago, I bought a home in Dunstable on 2.5 acres because that was our zoning, and it was on a trout stream. And I had a couple of other engineers in my town, and we got together and we looked at the town, and we did a SimCity study. So we did the first state cluster zoning law. We also did a master plan that was updated annually, and we also bought land in the town to protect the water. The citizens, we took a proactive approach of using our tax base to buy property to protect the water quality. And then we attempted to use the water as a resource for entertainment, fishing, canoeing, etc. I moved to Pembroke specifically because Pembroke is a water community on the South Shore. And I got involved in planning because I wanted to do this type of thing. But the town has to get involved. Businesses are not going to do it for us. We have to do it. We have to start looking at wastewater treatment facilities. I was totally thrilled when this 55 plus had a wastewater treatment facility. Even our additional growth of what we're doing in the town, we have to start looking at the way we look at wetlands protection, okay? Wetlands protection, if I buy a house and it's got a wetland zone on it, I shouldn't be doing anything in that area, but on top of that, I shouldn't even own the property because that affects water quality for the town. So as a developer, we should be setting up zoning laws where we say, okay, I've got this lot, it's a 1 acre lot, but a portion of it's wetlands. So when I go to the town, I want to say, look, I've got a 1 acre lot, but I'm going to carve off the wetlands. That's what I'll be taxed on as the person who owns the property. And then the wetlands is permanently protected. It's a simple thing. So there's things that we can do to be proactive, but we the people have to do it. It's not going to get done by business effectively. We have to proactively start doing these things. And surface water is what becomes groundwater that they're pumping. So it's not protected if the surface water is not protected. It's as simple as that. So we need to start protecting our ponds. We need to look at buying land when it comes available on any pond in town. The town people, we need to be buying property around ponds. Once we buy that property, then we can redevelop it as the town. We can say, pull all those houses away from the town, build a large development project with affordable housing, with a wastewater treatment facility, and all those septic systems are now off the pond. We can do it with a master plan 40 years in the future and work towards it. And it will get paid for because you buy the land, you hold the land for 10 years, it's developable, you turn it into revenue, you fix the problem. It's all doable, but we as citizens have to do it. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Stephen. And you were actually on the master plan committee?
Yes, I chaired.
And there you go. So elements of that,
Plan and we're still working.
I understand, but elements of what you've just said then are in that master plan. I think we're going to have a bit of a quick show of hands here. We've got 10 minutes left. We're halfway through the water questions, and we've got questions for the other departments. Do we move on? Okay. So I'm going to skip your... Well done, Dan. So we've got questions on town planning. I'm going to throw these to you, Bill, but there's other people in the room that can answer these questions. Infrastructure is designed to accommodate what population capacity? This is a great question, actually. I think I asked it.
So we are planning on our major roads. Some of our roadways, we cannot expand capacity for population. We just don't have the roadway width, the right of way to be able to do that. We would be purchasing your land to make that happen. On the bigger projects such as Route 36, and Route 14 before that, and some of the other roadways that we have done as a community, we're building those to current specifications, which really, other than for passage of cars and the number of cars that pass over that road, it's an unlimited capacity. It's only limited by the ability of the number of cars that transition through there. We're putting in the light cycles where we need the light cycles. We're putting in traffic circles where we need those, the intersections. We are complying with the manual for uniform traffic control devices otherwise known as MUTCD, which does restrict, I know there's been some frustration on some of the intersections, instead of coming straight out on 36, it bends. Those are all federal requirements that we have to comply with, which does limit the transition time somewhat, but we are planning for maximum capacity.
Another question here. Based on the town's expectation of development and growth over the next 5 to 10 years, when do you expect our infrastructure to exceed its life? We've got a lot of infrastructure planning going on. I mean, this building is a new building. We've got the public safety building, which is on track, John? On track. That'll be coming online. There are other infrastructure projects.
So there are a number of infrastructure projects that are in the planning stages. Most of them are very, very small. Public safety, obviously, this building we just opened up, we're looking at a 50-year useful life. And we're planning for, as we spoke last night at the select board meeting, planning for expansion within the community, allowing for that space to have extra storage capacity for equipment, for staff, so that we plan ahead based upon what the anticipated population growths are over the next 20 years.
Thank you. I think you've answered that. That's what projections have been made to determine our infrastructure that will need to be repaired or replaced.
So some of that isn't based on population growth, though. I mean, we're starting, and I don't want to speak because it's not my lane, so to speak, for the schools, but obviously the schools are planning some things, and that's not population growth, but it's based on technology and needs that are changing dramatically. Or if you look at where we were 10 years ago for technology, we're teaching different technology and different things that the schools are likely going to be bringing forward over the next several years that we need to start planning for. We're talking about that today on a couple of things which I won't get into this evening, but we need to think about that, and we need to plan for that, and we want to make sure that we're including that in our long-term capital planning.
And I'll just slip in a quick ad. We will be hosting an education forum, so those questions will be answered in the education forum. Hot topic. I don't think anyone can answer this just yet. What's the expected cost and plan to cover these replacements and repairs?
Well, we can't answer it fully because not all of that is there, but we do have within our capital planning about $18.6 million worth of infrastructure improvements over the next 5 years.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask, so that's going to be my next question. So how much is it going to cost? How is it going to be funded?
So it's funded a number of different ways. Some of it is,
Yep.
We talked about funding for roadways. There are similar funding for some of those projects. Some of those projects will be funded within the levy. Some of those projects will be funded by free cash. Some of those projects will be funded by grants. There's two that I can think of I won't discuss tonight, but certainly in the next several months we'll be hearing about those. The board will be getting presentations on those. The library trustees will be getting presentations on one of those. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of funding sources. A couple of those will likely have to be approved by the voters. They're big enough where we would need to do a debt exclusion.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a genius, by the way. I can see all the questions here. I'm just jumping around. They're not going up on the board here. Okay, 5 more minutes. Sorry.
Can I say one quick thing? I think that people need to understand.
Would you like a mic?
It's just, I want to do it quickly. I think people need to understand that one of the things that Bill has brought to the town is the capital planning. And so when you think about roadway management, a lot of people get upset about the condition of the roadways. I can remember when DPW commissioners came to town meeting somewhere around 2017. Andy, you might remember. And they said, in order to meet a roadway management plan, we need extra money every year. The first time we did that was when Bill Chenard became our town manager, and he's been finding ways to put into the budget that $500,000 a year, which is allowing us to start to actually carry out a plan. So I think that what we have to recognize when we're looking at the costs to cover replacements and repairs over the years is it's the planning that people like Bill and Dan Sullivan are doing that are allowing us to build it into a plan and a budget that's going to be sustainable.
100%. 100%. This is a hot one. Oh, and she's left the building. The person who asked this question is no longer in the building. However, I think it's worth asking. And forget the detail of this question. The question stems from the fact that we paved a road in November 2023, and then we dug it up for Eversource. And the question is, I think we've answered this question tonight.
Well,
but-
I'm happy to go a little further on this question because we have a 5-year
Okay.
moratorium. Utility companies in Massachusetts do have exemptions to that, especially if it's a gas company. Eversource was doing gas line work there. However, we also have restrictions that force them to pay to bring the roadway back and improve it. And we have aggressively gone after that. For High Street, for West Elm, for example, they're paying the entire cost. Other than some small oversight that we would do that they say, well, we don't need your oversight, but yes, we do. So there are restrictions that force them to bring those. If they're within that 5 years that where we paved it, they own that cost.
So the question actually, if you drill into it, is they're a bit frustrated that taxpayer money has gone into repaving a road and then it's dug up, but you're saying...
No more than I am.
Right.
When we're paving and doing a major paving project, we coordinate 2 years ahead of time with our utility companies and say, if you got gas mains you got to dig up, if you have something else going on, do it now. So it frustrates, and I'm just going to say, it frustrates the hell out of me when a utility company comes in a year after you've paved it. And that's why we put some of the penalties in place and the costs in place to force them to provide us with a roadway bond, so to speak. Some companies, the smaller ones, are just cash, but.
Terrific. We have, or actually, we're at time. Are we on air, off air? Keep going. Okay. Everyone all right? Happy to keep going? All right.
Wrap it up.
So,
Please wrap it up. I want to keep going.
contradiction from the select board, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we do have one other question here. Question on trails. It's a question that's come to us. Who's maintaining the trail system in Pembroke?
No one.
Okay.
It is something that we need to address. As a community, it's historically been maintained by volunteers. We don't have the capacity within our existing staffing to do that. We're barely keeping up with some of the other. Someone in the back of the room could probably address this. She's the one that's responsible for a lot of our mowing and that type of work. And we need more staff there, without a doubt. It's a focus point of mine. It's been a focus point of the DPW director. And so we need a plan for trails. I know that it was discussed at the select board meeting last night, and we're going to work toward a plan for trails. Unfortunately, you can't prioritize trails over roadways or schools or police, fire, other infrastructure costs that we have. So it is challenging for us, but we need to find a way to get there.
I'm out of questions. I had a feeling. I'm gonna let Aline. You've already spoken. I'm gonna let Aline Flashman ask a question. Aline, come to the mic and don't ask about the library driveway.
That is exactly what I'm asking. So at the town meeting, we got funds for redoing the entrance to the driveway to the library. When is that going to take place?
It is. So we actually asked the engineers to take a look at that, and because of the infrastructure there, it is a much larger project than we had initially anticipated. So that's why it's been, you're talking about the hump on the entranceway? Yeah. Yeah, so what we thought we could do was simply raise that up, smooth that out, cut down a portion of that. We can't just do that, so it's a bigger project than we had anticipated.
Thank you, Aline. I did ask him not to ask it, but.
Can I touch on that? As chairman of the library building committee way back then, we recognized
So
that...
it's your fault.
Pardon?
It's your fault.
Yes, well, kind of.
Take credit. Careful.
We objected to it, and the state told us it has to be like that. And we We objected, and that's the way that bump is there, and it's a horrible bump. And hopefully we can correct it. I'm going to take another minute to kind of take us a bit.
If the people that are waiting to go home are happy for you to take another minute?
It's about infrastructure, and it's a little bit of an announcement. There's going to be more of an announcement later, but about 10 years ago, the library trustees and the Friends of the Pembroke Library, which Tracy is a member of, approached me about starting a nonprofit for the library. So there is the Pembroke Public Library Foundation, and one of the goals is to put an addition on the children's room with no public funds. And over the years, we've been raising some money. We have a benefactor that's been very helpful, and we're going out for plans through the town's process to see what that would cost and what it would look like. It was part of the original design. The library is designed for 20 years of population and growth. We're now at about 26 years, and the children's programs are just thriving. So you will be hearing more, but there will be something in infrastructure for the library, a positive thing, and not going to ask the taxpayers for any money.
It's going to ask you a lot. Thank you, Bob. Stefan, did you want to say something?
One last thing I wanted to say is that I wanted to ask the gentleman from the business community, what about power in towns with developing power? Because there's so much government money available for power development, electrical energy development, windmills, solar panels, et cetera. And, and we really need to be trying to take advantage of that as much as possible to improve our power infrastructure. Because I know people are paying enormous electric bills. I, for one, took advantage of the solar program and bought solar panels for my house 10 years ago. I have saved myself $86,000 over the last 8 years in electricity and sent back $4,000 a year surplus to the electric company, which I planned for an electric vehicle. But people need to really start looking at solar power and taking advantage of it as soon as possible, because it's an amazing savings, an amazing benefit, but we as a town should be doing something as well.
You saved $86,000 over how long a period?
8 years. I bought the panels myself. I overrated my house the year before I got the panels.
What are you doing in the house that you're running that kind of electric?
Yeah, no, I'm an engineer. I do funny stuff. I've got 26 panels, and when they installed my meter, they said, "Oh my God, this meter is going like a bat out of hell. What is your usage?" And I said, "Well, it's not as bad because I took out all the lights in my basement and all the lights in my attic, and I got rid of the old hot tub I bought to run up the bill. But I ran up my bill before I got the panels, so I got to put up 150% of my capacity. And I bought the panels, so I get SREC credits. So I get paid by the government every quarter for my excess power."
It sounds to me like you're running solar panels to generate a nuclear power plant.
No, but I dealt with my power capacity for running 2 electric vehicles as well, which means I'd eliminate my gas bill.
Well,
That's a little bit.
just a note on that, in the building department weekly, we're taking in about 3 to 5 permits for solar every week, yeah.
Are people
Yeah.
buying them, or
Both.
Yeah. Stefan, your 86,000 saving, was it 86 you said? Does that include savings in gas that you're not putting in the cars?
I don't have an electric vehicle, unfortunately. My commute is too far.
So it could be even, okay.
So I'm sending it back to them for free.
Got it. Impressive. Very good. Do we have any other questions that... We don't. Andy says no, we don't have any other questions. Well, I have to say thank you so much for attending tonight. Thank you to Local Scene for all that you do. This is the first broadcast from this facility. There's lots of wire involved, and Dustin and Dan have done a fantastic job. We've been here 3 times testing it, and they've been here. They've done a great job. So forget Local Scene, Dan and Dustin. Big props. I also, you know what, I've got a thank you screen. Why am I wasting my words? I also want to thank Lance and his team here. This is a magnificent facility. it really is a gem in Pembroke, and we've just got to make good use of it. And Lance is doing a terrific job. There were a lot of questions for you, Lance. I'm not going to put you through them tonight. I know you are. You're very approachable. I'll send you an email and we'll try and get something distributed to everybody. So that's it for tonight. Thank you again to the panel. Very informative. And thank you for attending. Good night.